Now, do you remember this teenager from last year's Britain's Got Talent? His name is Jack Carroll, and he uses his cerebral palsy as the basis for some of his jokes.
Do you know what I can't stand? Sorry, let me emphasise. Do you know what I can't stand? But look on the bright side. I've never had to queue at Disneyland. I was at the cinema seeing the new James Bond film the other day, and it got me thinking, maybe I would have liked to have had a go, being James Bond, but obviously I'm a bit inhibited. Ah, Mr. Bond, I've been expecting you. No lift.
That's a very funny Jack Carroll on Britain's Got Talent. But have you ever wondered why we use the word disability to describe an individual who has an impairment of some kind, whether it's physical or cognitive or mental? Wouldn't it be more empowering and apt to describe individuals like Jack Carroll as differently abled or, better still, unique? This December, to coincide with the UN International Day of Persons with Disabilities, Kanchi are taking to the road to kickstart a national conversation on disability and the language we use to describe it. To kick off that conversation, I'm joined in studio by UCD student Sarah Kerrigan, Kanchi Communications Officer Amy Hynes Fitzpatrick, and adventurer and author Mark Pollock. Good morning and welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, do you each have an issue with the word disabled?
I would prefer if people used person first language, so a person with a disability. So for me, it would be a person who's visually impaired or a person who's legally blind. I think it's incredibly important that you acknowledge a person for being a person and not define them by what makes them different.
All right, so you don't want someone is disabled. It is a person with a particular issue.
You have a disability. It doesn't. It's one character. It's just one part of you. It doesn't define you.
I mean, if for example, you're tone deaf, nobody knows. You don't say, well, here's Sarah, she's tone deaf. You don't say that.
No.
It's only really, Sarah, when a so-called impairment is evident. And in your case, it is.
Yeah, definitely. With my one arm and one leg, people would see me and be like, oh, she has a physical disability. But I don't know. I don't really see myself as having a disability. I genuinely feel that the only disability in life is a bad attitude. And the person who has the inability to see the glass as half full will have a much more challenging life than I will ever have with my one arm and one leg.
Now, it's perfectly apparent when I met you this morning. You have a very nice sweater on. It's a grey sweater. Your arm on one side is complete and therefore the sweater is rolled down. On the other, you don't have a complete arm and you've rolled the sleeve of the sweater right up.
Yeah, my left arm.
So how do people normally look at you, or do they not look at you? Do they turn away just so not to see it, or do they pretend that you've got two perfectly formed arms?
Yeah, well, it really varies from person to person, like what kind of approach they take with me. I just started college this year, and in primary school, secondary school, a lot of people knew me because I was in the area. So there wasn't that many new people around. So now that I'm in college, it's a completely different environment. And I find that I'm just learning to adapt to everything like that with the looks and the not looks and the way people approach me. It really does vary.
Sarah, from a child, say a 6-year-old sees you, the first thing they would say to you is, what happened to your arm?
Yeah, definitely.
And would you prefer that?
Yeah. 100%. With a child, with an adult, I don't care who it is, what age they are. I just want people to be straight out, be like, so what's the story?
What's the story?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, maybe you tell us, what is the story? What happened?
Nothing happened. I was just born this way, congenital birth defect, and my left arm didn't form completely, and neither did my right leg.
So that's it. This is the way you've always been. So you've grown up like this, and you've coped and learned to do all the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
This way.
Yeah, like Lady Gaga's song, I was born this way.
I was born this way. Now, Mark, you have had serial disabilities come upon you, isn't that so?
Yes, I'm an expert in acquiring disabilities. First blindness in 98 and now paralysis in 2010.
Initially, you had to come to terms yourself with blindness, having known the world as a sighted person.
Yes, we were chatting outside, actually, Amy and Sarah and I, and Amy and Sarah were born that way, as Sarah said. I acquired my disabilities, and I suppose I maybe have a view that when I first acquired blindness, I was sensitive to the words, the language, visually impaired, blindness, what people thought about me, what I thought about myself. And then over time, as I became defined by the things that I did rather than my disability, South Pole, Gobi Desert, adventure racing, I became an adventurer rather than a blind guy. And the reason I think that I initially was worried about being labelled as blind was because, well, what does that say about me? You know, I'm prejudiced, in fact, against people like me, is the horrible truth of it. I thought blind people were, you know, incapable, not up to it, couldn't do things. So the fact that I was one of those blind people was horrible to me. And I think this is the nub of the issue about language. What does the label mean? What assumptions do we make about?
That's an extraordinary thing, though, to be prejudiced against yourself.
Well, look, Nelson Mandela, when he got on before he went into prison, got onto a plane, and there was a black guy flying the plane, and he was worried whether the black guy was capable of flying a plane. So if Nelson Mandela's prejudiced against the thing that he's battling against, I think we all are capable, should acknowledge our blind spots. You know, are we racist, sexist, homophobic? Do we have prejudice against alpha males, people with disabilities? You know, if we become aware about it, if we get it out on the table, if we acknowledge it, then we have a chance of moving forward.
Now, the whole idea of this is to change the nature of the conversation. So, Amy, what are you going to be doing to attempt to change that conversation?
It's very exciting. We actually started this kind of project last year through an initiative called Kanchi 100.
Now, Kanchi was the organisation founded by Caroline Casey,
yeah, so we were
who rode across India on an elephant.
Yeah, so we were formerly known as the Ashling Foundation. We ran the Ability Awards in Ireland. And now through our Kanchi Business Network, that's where Kanchi 100 and Kanchi 500 have come from. So last year we had...
Kanchi is Kanchi, which is the name of the elephant.
It is. It's the name of the elephant that Caroline travelled across India on. And it's one of those things, we always say that disability is like the elephant in the room. So we're trying to kick that elephant out of the room. We want more and more people to be talking about disability and to engage with it. And that's what this is all about. We want to give people a platform to start that conversation, to ask the questions. You know, sometimes I'd be uncomfortable asking questions about different disabilities, but it's the ability to ask that question that will really start changing how people think about the label disability. So next,
how do you avoid prurience, Mark? You know, where people are almost enjoying finding out about stuff where you might think it's none of your business.
Yeah, well, I think for the fact that myself and Sarah and Amy are here in the room with you and talking about this subject would suggest that we are comfortable about talking about the subject of disability and explaining it. And from my point of view, I think it's up to people like us who are now robust enough to deal with those comments, to educate, to talk about it, to explain. Because for a lot of people who are transitioning, who have recently acquired disabilities or who haven't had the backup supports that we perhaps have, it's difficult, and those questions, those conversations are difficult at a time. So it's about, like Kanchi are doing, it's about starting the conversation, it's about being open, it's about discussing it, and in fact, learning about the disability, but really learning about what people are doing in their lives, what they're contributing, what they're doing in, like Sarah in university, working like Amy, like all those people who are out there doing things defined by what they do rather than the label that's put upon them.
Language evolves. I mean, there was a time when people with an evident physical disability would have been referred to as cripples. That doesn't happen anymore. Now people are referred to as disabled, and language moves on. And you say it should be the person who happens to have a particular disability is the way they should be referred to, rather than otherwise.
That's a personal thing. I would prefer if someone, you know, identified me as a person before they looked at my white stick or the fact that I can't see. It's just it's just something very simple. When you look at a person, you talk to a person. You don't talk to a stick or a wheelchair or, a missing limb or any impairment. You talk to a person.
Yeah. I think someone who's born with an impairment, and you mentioned Caroline Casey, founded the Ashling Foundation. I remember she telling me that now she is legally blind, which means that she can't see very much at all. If she looks at a screen, the letters have got to be sort of monster letters for her to make out anything. And she told her father as a teenager she wanted to learn to drive, not realising for a second that she would have been a danger to everybody if she'd taken to the road. So that's where you're coming from. You were born this way, and it's the only way you know yourself.
Yeah.
Is it therefore, do you think, easier to accept that you can't do maybe everything that you might have liked to do, play hockey, for instance?
Well, actually, I did play hockey.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I was the goalie in 4th year, and I was pretty good, if I may say so myself. Yeah, I suppose I'm just really determined and stubborn by nature, so I can't really accept that I can't do things. I try to the best of my ability, and if I can't do it the first way, I'll try find a different way.
All right. Now, the reason I ask you that is because this is the way you were born, you've grown with it, and you won't let anything stand in your way.
No way.
But Mark, because you accumulated your disabilities, your fall, which led to you now being in a wheelchair. But I know that you're determined to perhaps, if it's possible, to regrow nerves and maybe someday walk again, certainly use robotics.
Yep.
But for people who acquire a disability, who fall off a motorbike or off a horse or whatever, it must be so much harder than for Sarah, who has known nothing other than the way she is.
I'm not sure. It's I suppose it depends the supports that you have around you, the type of person that you are yourself, and how you make your way through life. But I suppose whether I'm in a wheelchair and blind, or like Sarah's missing limbs, Amy's visually impaired, it's about choices, and all this stuff is about. I've created a life where I can earn money and go adventuring and walk in robotic legs, and in a way I'm in control. But when it comes to the simple thing of getting a job, if someone with a disability is going in to try and get a job, and the person who's employing is looking at that person, labelling that person with a disability and making assumptions about what they can and can't do, well, then this is where it becomes difficult. And this campaign is about opening up the conversation to find out what people with disabilities can do, so that they can have a choice and go on and get a job and earn money. So I don't know whether it's more difficult if you acquire a disability, or whether you grew up with a disability. But all we can do is deal with what we've got today, right now, whatever position it is, and make disability something that we can talk about, that we can understand, that we can acknowledge our assumptions about.
Stay with us, Mark and Sarah and Amy, and we'll continue this conversation after 11. Thank you very much, Ciara. Betty's on the line. Hello, Betty.
Morning, Pat.
Now, we've been talking about the conversations around people who have a disability of one kind or another. Often people who are fully abled don't know how to talk about it. Tell me about your son.
Yeah, my son is Brian. He's 32. Would be described maybe as borderline, came up through his youth with that sort of tag, but no real box that he's in, Went to special ed and is now in sheltered workshops and has a little part-time job. But I just find I have a major problem with the word disability, and particularly when it's used in the company of what I call our special needs boys and girls. Mm-hmm. I feel with my Brian anyway, I feel he knows that it's a negative word describing him. And I suppose it came to the fore when a couple of years ago I was at a function, and it was an awards function, and the host, who, was just reading her lines, but on 3 occasions, and we were all sitting around a table, described people with disabilities, and I just cringed every time she said the word. Now, they won't all know what disability means when, depending on the level of intelligence, but for many of them who are in the borderline area, I think they do.
And they feel it's a pejorative term about them.
I would love another word, and we're so good at changing the English language these times in so many ways, a lot of it jargon, but there must be another good word that hasn't a negative,
All right. And
like disability.
If your son was described as someone with special needs, is that okay?
I don't find it as bad.
Not
actually.
as bad.
It's less harsh than somebody with disability.
All right. Amy, you wanted to say something on that.
Yeah, so I have a disability as well, Betty. And to be honest, it's a word that doesn't sit right with me either. And I know that quite often we do look to different phrases and stuff that we can use, but I guess from my kind of standpoint and stuff like that, I think it's a negative word, but it's the meaning behind it that makes it negative. So rather than coming up with 50 million other options, I think our best kind of solution here is to really just change thinking on disability and to allow people, to open up their minds, to ask questions about disability and take away that stigma that's attached to it.
Mm. And I suppose I'm talking from the protective mother angle, rather than...
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, do you have a comment on that? Because it's the attitude behind the word rather than the word itself.
Yeah, well, I the worry is if you change it to, I've heard differently abled used, we need some kind of anchor. And really, the important thing, Betty, is what you described about your son, what he's doing, with his life, and out there living a meaningful life. That's the important thing that we should be talking about, rather than the word. I think we should be really focused on what people are doing, contributing, and gaining from life, rather than the label.
Sarah? Yes, Betty, go on.
We're all aware of that as parents. We know it's all about the life they lead. And here in Kilkenny, it's the most amazing place in terms of people with any sort of special needs. They're so well looked after. They've so many social things to go to. But I'm just adding to the conversation about the word disability.
Sarah?
Really.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I feel that the word disability puts people in a little box and kind of... I don't know, puts restrictions around them. And like Mark said and Betty, focus on their ability and the life that they lead and what they can do as opposed to what they can't do.
All right, now we're talking about the programme the Kanchi are organising, and you wanted to stress, Amy, that this is very important in partnership with business.
Yeah, so in Kanchi, it's a very simple goal that we have. We were set up for one reason, and that's to reframe disability. So we want to create a world where every single person can contribute and is included. And that's why we chose business. Within the disability community, we have amazing leaders. There's some incredible people, but disability issue and the stigma surrounding it can't just be solved by people with disabilities. So Kanchi look to business. We believe that if we can change business and make them inclusive, society will follow. So for Kanchi 500, we've managed to partner with some incredible organisations. We're starting with Cavan County Council on Monday, providing our training up there. Then down in Cork, we've partnered with PepsiCo. Limerick, we've partnered with Dell. And in Galway, we've partnered with Medtronic. And the great thing is these aren't new partnerships. These are organisations that are proactively working to become inclusive because they believe in it. It's good for their business. They started with the Ability Awards and they've joined our business network. They really do see the benefit of being inclusive, and that will ripple out into the communities in which they operate.
A couple of things. On December the 3rd, it's International Day of Disabled People. Do you have an issue with that title? I just wondered.
Well, technically the title is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And it's an annual celebration, and I think it's good that we actually have a day and we go, let's talk about disability. It gives people a great opportunity to talk about it. And this year the theme of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities is breaking down barriers, and that's why we're doing what we're doing this year. We want everyone to get involved. Okay,
and what we want people to do is to tweet pictures from their day to Newstalk FM, at Newstalk FM, with the hashtag IDPD. So that'll be on December the 3rd. Also, you can join in Kanchi and start the conversation on disability in Ireland. Kanchi 500 is a national awareness campaign which will provide 500 people across Ireland with free disability awareness training between the 2nd and the 6th of December. That's what Amy's been talking about. And you can register right now at kanchinetwork.com, KANCHI network.com, kanchinetwork.com, and the Dublin number is 634 001. 0018 634 0018. And you have a very simple piece of advice, Mark. If people...
Yeah, if people... We all have different opinions. I'm not right. Amy's not right. Sarah's not right necessarily. Complex issue. And if you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to approach someone with a disability, what to say, what offends someone, what doesn't offend someone, I think the big message is just ask.
Just ask.
Exactly.
All right. Approach in good heart and you will be fine.